Hello folks, it's Charlie in Westeros here, and welcome to my video for 4 major predictions I have for Season 6 of Game of Thrones. I should say that in spite of the show being pretty much caught up with the books, there are a few things that haven't really been dealt with yet on the show, and as a result I must give my fellow non-book readers a spoiler warning for this video. I also would like to state that I'm only expressing my personal hunches as to where the TV show is going with the next season, and I absolutely know nothing as to what actually will happen, so if my opinions somehow offend you, sorry. Also, although I will only be discussing 4 specific predictions for Season 6, I do have a whole lot more to say on the upcoming season, and if you are interested in those thoughts, please tune into my group discussion with James Johnson and the Small Council on his channel. A link to that video will be in the info box below, but first, without further ado, let me get into my predictions.
Number 1. Cersei's Vengeance.
As fellow book readers might remember at the end of Book 5, Grand Maester Pycelle and Kevan Lannister are suddenly assassinated by Varys, who makes a return to King's Landing in order to counter any possibility of them healing the growing divide between the Lannisters and the Tyrells and possibly challenge the arrival of the Aegon character and his attempt to claim the Iron Throne. However, as we all saw in Episode 10 of Season 5, Varys is quite far away from King's Landing and is chilling over in Meereen with Tyrion Lannister, so that creates a bit of an issue for him murdering Pycelle and Kevan. So, what do I think will happen? Well, given that following her walk of penitence, and although quite injured and shamed, Cersei doesn't seem to be as broken as she was in the books. After the fact that Kevan left her in the Sparrow's hands to be tormented and humiliated, and noting Pycelle's devilish smirk and seeing her naked and ruined upon her return to the Red Keep, it is my belief that, in fact, she will be the one to order the newly revived Mountain to kill her uncle and Pycelle. As Qyburn told Cersei, quote, "He has sworn that he will not speak until all his grace's enemies are dead and the evil has been driven from the realm." Considering Pycelle and Kevan did nothing to get Cersei out of the Sparrow's prison, they might be in her mind considered enemies. In Book 4, Cersei also burns down the Tower of the Hand of the King with wildfire, and I wouldn't be surprised if she orders a similar event in the show, only this time she makes it appear to be an accident, and Kevan and Pycelle were simply trapped there so she could at least avoid the blame on the surface. As for the Tyrell-Lannister alliance, I can only see that going downhill as well, especially if a prominent Tyrell figure is killed or executed. Maybe Lady Olenna will also end up in that tower. Who knows? Now, all that said, I think the most epic thing Cersei will order in Season 6, and this is something I have been saying for a very long time, is that she will burn King's Landing down to the ground. In Season 2, Daenerys had a vision where she is walking through a burnt-out Red Keep, and although I think many people have assumed that would be the work of dragons, I personally am under the impression that this might, in fact, come about as a result of Cersei's doing and intentions. Remember, practically all of King's Landing witnessed her shame as she walked through the streets, and outwardly mocked and insulted her throughout. That is not something she's likely to forget, and I feel pretty confident in saying that just like Mad King Aerys Targaryen, who was tortured, lost his mind, and then tried to order the burning of King's Landing before Jaime killed him, Cersei will have a similar reaction, only this time, she will succeed in destroying the city and almost all of its people. Now, whether or not you think this is a hint that Cersei and Jaime might actually be Aerys Targaryen's illegitimate children, well, I'll leave that judgment up to you folks. Now for my next prediction.
Number 2. Daenerys and the Dothraki.
At the end of Season 5, Dany is surrounded by a pack of Dothraki in a swirling pattern, sort of like at the end of Season 3 when the freed slaves elevated her over their shoulders. Many people have wondered whether or not she will be harmed by the Dothraki. My personal opinion is that the Dothraki do not mean her any harm, and I am honestly largely basing this off of Drogon's reaction. It would be a little strange that Drogon was ready to save her in Daznak's pit only 1 episode prior, but this time around he lets her be taken by the Dothraki. I somehow feel that if there was a concrete threat, Drogon might not be so lax in trying to at least protect, or at least try to protect Daenerys. The other aspect is that given Dany's conquest of Slaver's Bay with little to no Khalasar left in Season 3, I think the Dothraki are more likely to be impressed by her actions rather than angered or threatened by them per se. I have a few more points to back that up, but I don't want to digress too much in this prediction video. So the Dothraki find Daenerys, who was also once Khal Drogo's wife, and undoubtedly they at least spotted her riding her dragon, and assuming they were impressed with her, she should be able to gain them as followers in some sense. My hunch is that with this group, and with the Sons of the Harpy undoubtedly still out in the open in Meereen causing chaos, we might get some twisted form of vengeance where she brings the Dothraki to Slaver's Bay and has them take care of those causing trouble in her city. Maybe even giving the Sons of the Harpy to the Dothraki as slaves in a really weird, twisted way. Of course, I'm skipping over quite a few plot points, such as Jorah and Daario's quest to find her, but I think the end result of her journey this season is one in which she reaches Meereen, cleans the city out, basically, and realizing that Slaver's Bay is not the right place for her and her presence has already caused a whole lot of chaos, she'll leave Grey Worm and Missandei to stay there and rule the freed slaves and ex-masters who would sue for peace. With all that taken care of, I suspect the last we will see of Dany in Season 6 is her departure for Westeros, along with Tyrion. I might also add that I do think that things will inevitably happen quite differently in Essos in the books, and I do realize we will be having a new Greyjoy this season, or this coming season. My hunch for now is that they will probably keep the Greyjoy's plot centered on Westeros proper rather than Meereen. But all that for another video.
Number 3. Sansa in the North.
So, I think it needs to be said that Sansa and Reek will almost certainly survive their fall, just like in the books. Now, I think it is important to state that based off of casting announcements for Season 6 of Game of Thrones, we will be seeing Morris Umber as well as his brother, Hother. In the books, these characters declared fealty for Stannis, and Morris is the one to actually capture the fleeing Theon Greyjoy and the fake Arya character as well. Of course, I strongly suspect that he will get a hold of Sansa and Theon in the same way in the show as in the books, but I also see Morris Umber playing a combined role of his own character, along with that of Wyman Manderly, who of course played a much larger role in the books. For reasons I will discuss in greater detail in the last point of this video, I also suspect Davos will inevitably meet up with Morris and Sansa, but I don't think we will get Davos going on his quest to find Rickon as in the TV show version. Rickon was said to be brought to Last Hearth by the Wildling woman Osha, and Last Hearth is of course the seat of House Umber. With the characters of Davos, Sansa, Rickon, and the Umbers reunited at some point during the next season, I think it is only then that we will truly begin to see some armed resistance against the Boltons form once more in the North. More importantly, I do believe the Wildlings that were at the Wall will join the cause of Sansa and Rickon Stark, for reasons I will explain in the last point of this video. But before I do, I also want to just quickly add that although I know there has been some discussion as to whether or not Stannis is still alive, I gotta say it, I need to say it that I think the hunch, my personal hunch is that he is pretty much dead and gone for good as far as the show is concerned. Again, I really think there will be some key differences in the way his story plays out in the books, but that is a discussion, again, for another video.
Number 4. The Wildlings and Jon Snow.
So the last scene of Season 5 with Jon Snow dying and some apparent statements by the show creators that Jon Snow is truly dead and won't be in Season 6 has caused people to really discuss Jon's role in the series in more detail. First, let's look at some pieces of evidence, though. It's currently early July, and as far as it has been reported, Kit Harington, who of course plays Jon Snow, still has his iconic long hair and beard, which of course is something that he reportedly said he would get rid of once his time on Thrones was done. So, considering he is still sporting the Jon Snow look, and it is admittedly a bit odd that his character wouldn't appear in some form or other this season if he still has this, general appearance about him. Nevertheless, let's just pretend he doesn't show up for Season 6. Whatever the case may be, I do think my hypothesis will hold up for both of these alternatives in some way. So, as we all know, the men of the Night's Watch are supposed to burn their dead. This reason is not only for fear that they might rise again as whites, but more importantly, it's part of their funeral ceremonies. As such, one of the first things that should happen upon the discovery of Jon Snow's dead body is his funeral, regardless as to whether or not he was deemed a traitor, of course. That said, something needs to happen to disrupt this occasion. I think it should go without saying that the Wildlings will already be very disgruntled to see their savior was not only murdered, but also branded a traitor by fellow men of the Night's Watch. That said, the Wildlings are still way more numerous than the men of the Night's Watch, so I don't think that the Night's Watch will be able to, or even really try to kill them necessarily. What I do think will happen, or might happen, is that Ollie, either by choice or by force, will confess who the culprits are behind Jon's murder, either to Davos or Tormund or the Wildlings as a whole even. This event will, of course, spark the violence that will disrupt Jon's funeral. The Wildlings and then the Night's Watch will inevitably fight one another, and with the possible exception of a very few select men, the Night's Watch will be all but wiped out, and Alistair Thorne will end his watch as probably the shortest-lived Lord Commander in history. After this event, I suspect the remaining wildlings will just scatter south away from the wall. Now, since Last Hearth is probably the closest stronghold to the wall itself, many wildlings will end up on Umber territory. Moreover, knowing that Sansa is related to Jon Snow and seeing another wildling in the form of Osha with Rickon there, many will likely feel comfortable or at least safe enough putting in their lot with the Umbers and the surviving Starks of the North. Now, I'm sure many of you are wondering what will happen with Jon's body and Melisandre. Well, as she always does, Mel will probably disappear for a time and reflect on her next plan of action. In the meantime, and with the arrival of winter, Jon's body will stay whole at the wall, albeit frozen. While I do strongly suspect his conscience could very well warg into Ghost for a time, I could also see the show doing one of two things with him. What I suspect is that the Night's King finally arrives at the abandoned wall, crosses south with relative ease, and upon entering the ruins of Castle Black, he will see Jon's body, and remembering how this man defeated one of his own generals, might reward Jon by reviving him as one of his own. That is, as a White Walker rather than a White, which would certainly be a first for Game of Thrones. Now, the other possibility is that Melisandre, realizing Jon Snow is the real Azor Ahai figure that she thought Stannis was, will just return to the wall and revive him there. One of these two events would, in my mind, occur at the very end of Season 6, at least in some form. After all, it would certainly be an interesting parallel to the end of Season 5 if the last scene for this upcoming season is the exact same as the last, where we get another close-up of Jon's body and suddenly his eyes open fully and he rises from the dead or something. I don't know. That's kind of what I imagined it to be in my head. Anyway, folks, those were just 4 of my predictions for Season 6 of Game of Thrones. I do have quite a few more thoughts, and certainly I left quite a bit of information blank to keep this as simple and concise as possible. Moreover, I think it's important to state that although I certainly expect others to have similar, if not the exact same opinions as I do for the show, I did come up with most of these thoughts on my own. Really, the only people who would have had influence over my thoughts and my way of thinking about the show would be the people I actually do reviews with, such as my friends on the Small Council, or my fellow French Game of Thrones reviewer, Sweet YFT. So, folks, what do you think will happen in Season 6? Do you guys have a different take? If so, let me know what you think in the comment section below. And of course, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this video. So that's all for now, folks. I will see you all very soon. Ciao for now.